Welcome to Financial Discretion Advised. I'm Abram Berkemeyer.
I'm Tyler Hafford. Let's cue the music. Hey everyone, thanks for joining Financial Discretion Advised. Before we get going, AB, how are you?
Doing great, Tyler. How you doing?
Good. I'm glad I'm back in the Portland office so we can do this in person.
It's always better having you here.
Yeah, I was trying to get away from you, but you're difficult to run away from.
It's not so easy.
Today we're gonna tackle some estate planning stuff. Tie it into the upcoming holiday, but let's do the in the news.
Yeah, in the headlines.
Yeah, give me what you got.
Yeah, one of the really interesting ones is a lot of the concern recently in Congress about the debt ceiling and raising that. That's something that they have to do routinely if they want to be able to make good on the current legal obligations in the United States that our government is set forth. Things like Social Security and interest on debt that we have, and Lord knows we got a ton of that.
Yeah.
But one of the ways that we finance our government and our system is through issuing new debt.
Yep.
If they don't raise the debt ceiling, then it's tougher to issue new debt. And so one way that was floated when they were having troubles, coming together to pass and raise a new debt ceiling was the minting of $1 trillion coin.
I'd like to see how big that coin is.
I know it's got to have a lot of surface area to fit all those zeros around the coin.
It's a big one. So the debt ceiling, probably seen it in the headlines. If you've been watching the market was bouncing around while they were kind of tackling this, and still is in a little bit of a slide here as we record this on October, what's today? 13th. But yeah, debt ceiling. So little known fact, we were one of two democratic countries in the world that actually uses a debt ceiling. Since 1960, the debt ceiling has been raised 74 times, I believe.
It was a lot.
78 times. There's been 4 shutdowns in U.S. history where the government shut down. All of these were due to impasses on the debt ceiling. All of those have happened since 1995. So up till 1995, kind of Congress got together, they raised the debt limit, debt ceiling, and just kept spending. Seems like since 1995, at least more conversations around should we be doing that or what's that look like?
Right, and that's one of the things that I've heard is a lot of the conversation around the debt ceiling. Like this time around, they're like, some people are getting sick of it. Yeah, it's like, why do we have it? And one of the purposes of the debt ceiling is to say, hey, you ran the credit card, and it's maxed out. Yeah, we're either gonna have to raise a limit or do something else because we can't use a credit card anymore. And obviously it's just one of those ways that spurs that conversation of, do we want to keep implementing more and more national debt? Obviously we're at all-time highs year over year with national debt.
So like you said, one of the things that they're looking at here is, why don't we just mint $1 trillion coin?
Right, and to avoid having to raise the debt ceiling.
To raise that. And essentially what we're doing is putting more money out into circulation. We don't have to we don't have to borrow against any more debt. But geez, that seems like it could compound a little bit of an issue that we're having right now with inflation.
Right. So that's the other big headline is inflation just came out for last month, and it was another, whopper of a month, 5.4%.
Yeah.
We've been at a couple months now at around that mark of just really high inflation.
So just throw some numbers around this. All items, all inflation, looking about 5.4%. Food is up about 4.6%. Energy up about 24.8%. If you think about where Americans spend their money, where is it? We spend it on our food, we spend it on our energy, we spend it on housing, we spend it on our cars. Right now, those 4 areas are all seeing pickup in consumer price index or inflation. And it doesn't seem to be as short term as maybe we were hoping it was. I know the Fed's still not raising rates to fight this right now. That's kind of their weapon against this, but inflation certainly hitting people's pockets.
Yeah,
starting to feel it a little bit more, and it's probably getting a little old going and looking at red meat in the supermarket right now and trying to scrounge up your $1 trillion coin so you can buy some.
Yeah.
But yeah, so flip side of the $1 trillion coin is, geez, how much more can we put into circulation and
right? So yeah, that's the big inflation concern. Obviously, if you're literally printing money through the use of this coin is now there's $1 trillion more, and now you've got more money chasing the same or fewer amount of goods and services. So, just back to that basic definition of what inflation is. I mean, and my big concern, honestly, inflation's a big concern, but you just know there's some ragtag team out there drawing up schematics, trying to get to the mint just so they can pocket that $1 trillion coin. And then, hey, that would be the biggest money heist of all time. If anybody's seen that show on Netflix, it's okay. But Money Heist, and you can check it out. The whole concept is go steal money from the mint.
Can a tractor trailer be a getaway vehicle?
I mean,
I'm thinking that's what you'd need, right? I mean, this is going to be a big coin.
Unless probably. I know. That's the other funny thing. It's just like you're walking around and you always see change on the sidewalk. It's like, oh, what's this one? I've never seen that one before. Oh my gosh, I'm a trillionaire. Just falls out of their pocket. But
so yeah, certainly something that's being floated. I don't know how serious they are about making this happen. I do think
right now they've actually done a temporary injunction where they have increase the debt ceiling as like a temporary relief. It's not as long term as
until December. And then they're it just kind of feels like maybe they're kicking the can down the road, but certainly something they're going to have to address. Inflation. Fed Chairman Powell came out and I think his quote was something that the inflation's frustrating, and he sees us going into 2022. A little bit of a change in the tone from the Fed on inflation there, but we'll obviously keep it going. As long as it stays in the headlines, you guys are going to hear us talking about it, but certainly something to pay attention to.
It's about as real as it gets as far as financial consequences that hit everybody. There's always there's that saying that obviously the government can increase your taxes, and that's one way that people can pay more, but inflation is the silent tax that you don't see in the headlines as much, because it's not something that people are passing to increase your cost of living that the government's doing. It's they're printing debt. The more money they pour onto the economy, if you follow the historical economic thought there on that, obviously the more money you put in, the higher inflation you get. That's a tax on everybody, because everybody gets hit with that inflation, whether or not they're increasing the marginal tax bracket on the 35% or higher earners or anything like that. If there's inflation and it's caused by the government printing more money, then that's a tax on everyone. Whereas
and the other side of this is not really correcting itself, and I don't think it's going to correct itself anytime soon, is we're still having supply chain issues, still going to drive up prices in its own. It's just a real impact for Americans. If your food prices are up 5%, if your energy prices are up 28%, you feel that. You're gonna feel that unless your wages went up 30% this year. It's something you're gonna pay attention to. But also in the headlines was Facebook got shut down for a few hours there.
It's scary.
I'm surprised that the world actually kept spinning after that happened. But Facebook's hitting the headlines for a number of reasons right now. That was one of them, but it was in the midst of kind of
this same day as the whistleblower testimony on Capitol Hill, and kind of stating that Facebook knew some of the stuff that they were doing was causing harm or kind of promoting hate and things like that. And it's created this interesting debate where, Facebook is a private company. They're making decisions to make money. And, on the flip side of that, do they have a responsibility to the public good and how they're operating their platform and things like that? I think what's really interesting here is not to get into who's right or wrong in that decision. We live in a world, we've talked about on this podcast, ESG investing is a wave going on right now, and how people are investing. How much does this impact Facebook's stock? Because the public image right now isn't fantastic for them. And how much does this snowball into other companies having an effect like this? Right. Facebook's not the only one. Big tech's always in up on Capitol Hill, whether it's Twitter or Google, YouTube, all the big household names, they're getting pulled up there pretty frequently, it seems like these days. Talk about major issues. But just aside from, the implications that the government might have over these companies, whether it's breaking them up as a monopoly or anything like that, or regulating them more, just the fact that Facebook was down for like whatever 5 hours or whatever, that was the headline that I pulled out was just the drop in the stock value. Zuckerberg lost like $7 billion of net worth in that day.
Yeah. Just big ramifications. And, you know, a lot of this is ad revenue generated, right? These how these businesses make their money. Politically charged articles and items draw people to the platforms, right? It keeps them engaged. That increases ad revenue. So they have a competing interest here against the public good and their own financial well-being as a company. So really interesting stuff. I don't think it will end with Facebook. Where it goes, I have no idea, but I do think it's interesting in just the fads we see in investing right now. ESG is driving one. Yeah. You know, what kind of impact will this have on the stock long term?
Definitely. All right, moving on to our little, I guess this is like a intermediary topic here. We got Halloween coming out.
We do.
What are you going as, Tyler?
Jeez, you're gonna make me tell everyone this, huh? My wife and daughters love to do the old family costumes.
Very good.
So this year, my youngest is gonna be Tigger. My oldest is gonna be Piglet. My wife is gonna be Pooh.
Oh, and I was pigging you as a Pooh.
Yeah, I know. I put some weight on. Thanks, sir. But you know I'd probably be a better Eeyore, but I'm going as Christopher Robin this year.
Nice. You get to be the only human.
Yeah. All right. And my costume is a pair of shorts
just
and a shirt.
Human clothes. Yeah. Seems like a bit of a cop out. I'm kind of like Jake from Allstate.
Luckily, my wife doesn't listen to this podcast. So
yeah.
What about you? What are you going as?
Undetermined yet. Last year we did the Sergeant Short Shorts outfit. So, you know, the little like aviators, mustache, real mustache, which I
not upset.
Obviously proud of that. Yeah. And then the shorts are very short. Yeah. This year we haven't really decided. I got a friend that we usually do something like kind of like a duo thing. So you know, maybe I'll I usually try to avoid the superhero stuff because it's just like you can't live up to it. It's a comic book, you know. It's like no matter how much you work out, it's never gonna look the way you want it to. I always recommend folks avoid doing comic book stuff. I think like the only one somebody could probably pull off is maybe like Captain America or Batman, just because they're like supposed to be just kind of average-ish humans. Yeah. But you know, anybody that ever tries to do the Hulk or anything like that, just you gotta stop.
So what's your favorite candy? What's the go-to on Halloween?
Yeah, I'm big on Twix.
Really?
The Cookie Crunch. Yeah. For all our Seinfeld fans out there. Yeah. It's the only candy bar with the Cookie Crunch.
Yeah, that's not a bad one. I like Twix is good. I like a Three Musketeers.
Yeah.
The fun size ones, nougat, the small ones. If I had to pick any candy, it is 100% Sour Patch Kids every time.
Yeah. What about Sour Patch Watermelon?
Yeah, no, I'm an OG. Okay. I like the originals.
What about Milky Way versus Three Musketeer? Get that little caramel.
Yeah, I know.
And then you get the chocolate nougat versus the.
I think I'm still going through. I think I'm going Three Musketeers. It almost feels lighter.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
I remember just being a kid. I always hated it.
Yeah.
It's just like I don't know, something about it.
Well,
anyway,
sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes you're wrong.
Yeah, and just one thing out there for folks. Obviously, like if you got trick-or-treaters in the area, you know, it could be an added expense around the holiday, not a big holiday, like a bunch of increased expenses with Christmas or anything like that. And so, you know, it's always nice to just give some candy to folks. But, you know, this is a good time where, you know, we always talk about things like budgeting and spending the money on what you need. But sometimes it's good to just spend the money on things that are going to make the memories and be that person that gets those kids those full-size candy bars. Just, you know, get a Sam's Club membership, spend $80. You'll be a hero. And, you know, that's just my thought on that.
It's more than $80, but you know, you don't want to be that family that's handing out like the elephant peanut, the big peanut, and like a cheap looking plastic bag or something.
I mean, hey, you're making memories for the kids that way too. Just not the right way.
I do remember the houses that gave out the crappy candy. So
yeah. Thanks. All right. Well, we're gonna segue this Halloween talk.
Yeah, let's give the people what they want.
Straight into our financial planning conversation. So obviously Halloween is a holiday around costumes and ghosts and scary things like death. So we are gonna just segue that right into our conversation today, estate planning. the one thing that is guaranteed on this earth is that you're going out of it at some point, and we need to plan for that.
Although I think Bezos is working against that.
Oh, is he?
I think, well, he takes like frequent moon trips, but I think he's also spending a lot of money on seeing how long we can live.
That's why Shatner's going to space today. He's like, oh man, I'm getting pretty high up there. I got to do what Bezos is doing and get some of that cosmic energy to keep me alive a little longer. But yeah, I mean, it's always good to plan for your estate just so that you're leaving behind what you want to leave behind, who you want to leave behind.
Yeah, the other 99.9999% of us are gonna die at some point.
Yeah, that's true.
And we should plan for what happens to your money when that happens.
Yeah. So there are kind of two ways that assets get distributed when you pass away, and we're going to talk kind of the process of each and the pros and cons. But one is through the court system and one is outside of the court system. So Tyler, I'm going to let you venture a guess. Which one is quicker, more efficient, and less time consuming, less of a hassle?
Yeah, anyone who's tried to deal with anything in the court system knows that that process is not quick. It is not easy. It is not cheap. It is not efficient. If you can pass assets along to family members or whoever you wanted to outside of the court system when you pass away, it would make everyone's life significantly easier.
And that's what we call non-probate. So probate just means that you're going through the court system, and that the probate is the process in the court system. Any assets that get distributed non-probate don't go through the court system, don't get tied up in all that mess.
So a couple things about the probate system, why it's more difficult to use, right? So when things go through the probate system, you lose any privacy because it's now a public affair on your assets and where they're going. Anyone can come make a claim to your assets, whether the court grants it or not, that'd be up to them, but it's no longer in your discretion of what happens there. Creditors have full access to come and take money they believe is owed to them. It's costly because you got to pay through the process and you have to have representatives and things like that to do it. So,
and one more thing is it does take time. So I think the other big thing is I believe Maine is actually a fairly efficient state in the probate court process, but it could take anywhere from a year to 2 years to settle an estate through going through the court.
So how can we avoid that? There's a few things. One of the easiest ones, I remember a podcast I was banging on the table telling people to check their beneficiaries on their retirement account. On your retirement accounts, you can have beneficiaries. Those beneficiaries will act as will substitutes. So they will, even if you had a will in place, it will direct the money to the person named on that account. By doing that, you skip the probate process.
Yep.
So Abram has me listed on all of his retirement accounts.
Every single one.
When he passes away,
you're so welcome.
I don't have to show up at the courthouse and tell them that I carried him through a podcast and I am entitled to some of this. It will directly go to me. And it's so important. It's such a cheap and easy way is to do that. But it's not even just limited to retirement accounts. If you have brokerage accounts, bank accounts, things like that, you can create what's called a TOD account or transfer on death account.
Little different name, it does the exact same thing.
Same exact thing. So you can list that. So life insurance, put a beneficiary on it. Annuity, it has ongoing payments after a period certain, something like that, put a beneficiary on it. Retirement accounts, qualified accounts, put a beneficiary on it. Any account outside of that, put a transfer death account on it.
Yeah.
All ways to skip the probate process and get the money to exactly who you want it to be.
Yeah. And
you can break it up in any way you want to. It doesn't just have to be Abram giving it to me 100%. It could be Abram gives 99% to me and 1% to Sam, the portfolio manager, because you want to give Sam some kicks. But you can break it up any way you want to. You can make a contingent. You can make charity a beneficiary of it. All of these are ways to avoid the court system.
Yep, exactly. And then, so I think you covered all those types of accounts perfectly. And then other things you can do.
Oh, thank you.
I know, I'm being way too nice today. Other things you can do is if you got joint accounts. So if you have a banking relationship, you can go to your bank and own a bank account jointly with somebody. And if you do that, then you don't need a beneficiary designation on that account. That money will go to whoever the surviving owner is, as long as it's owned jointly with rights of survivorship. So that's one way that, married couples or, any two people really could go open a joint bank account, and that money will pass to the surviving person. So obviously one area that I see a lot is, especially with younger clients, is they may have a joint bank account that was opened with a parent that has just lingered on forever. And it's like, now you're married. Maybe you don't want to keep owning that because you want the money to go to your spouse rather than your surviving parent.
Yeah.
If anything were to happen to you. So that's another one. And then obviously if you are married, that's another great way. If you do own individual bank accounts, then and you don't have beneficiary designations on it, you can make those joint accounts and be jointly owned.
It's very similar to like when you purchase a home with someone else and you have.
Right. It goes for all ownership structures, really. Yeah. You definitely want your house in the jointly owned, so that way the house doesn't have to go through probate. It just passes to the surviving spouse. It could go for any other type of property as well.
Yep. So it's a good way to do it. It avoids the probate process. It's going to speed things up, and ultimately, when someone passes, going through the probate process is taxing on the person who's been selected to kind of handle that for you. It's taxing on the beneficiaries. It's taxing on the family. They just lost a family member. Now they're wrapped up in legal things on where does the estate go, things like that. All of these steps you can take prior to passing away just helps make the process easier for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So why don't we dive into probate a little bit more now? Because sometimes, no matter what you do, there's going to be something going through probate.
Yep.
And how that process gets facilitated. So this is one area where it can be good to have a will in place because the will is your legal document. If you say you want an account to go to somebody, but you put a beneficiary on it, the will not override that.
Right.
So it's important to know that, you've kind of got some hierarchy here where if you have beneficiaries, it's not going to go through probate. That means no matter what you put in your will, if you have a beneficiary on that, it's not going to go through the court system, which means the will's not going to touch it, which means that no matter what your will says, that asset's getting distributed exactly how it has on the beneficiary. So the will is really a guiding document for the court to follow. If you don't have a will, then the court's just going to follow the letter of the law, and whatever the law in your state is, that's who the assets are going to get distributed to.
Additionally, some people will put on their retirement accounts the beneficiaries to their estate. Essentially, what you're saying there is, I want this to go through the probate process. Right. So I should have said that before. Some people do that. Essentially, what you're electing there is it's going to go to the probate process, and either the will is going to dictate what happens to that, or the legal system's going to work out where it should go.
Yeah.
So you're right. Will's in place. That's really good for things like Abram's art collection that he wants to make sure I get. Wants to put me in the will.
Hand painted.
Okay.
They're beautiful.
Actually, I didn't know you painted them. You can cross me off that. But great for those types of things that can be passed along that don't have like a contract piece to it, like a beneficiary.
Right. Yeah. So. Yep. So any type of kind of like real asset, real tangible asset, like you're 90, you've always wanted a Porsche, you go out and bought it, and then you put in your will, I want this to go to my grandson if I pass. Or if you didn't put anything in the will, then that asset, that car, is going to go through the probate process and land with somebody in the family.
Yep.
And then there's other assets too. So like you say you don't have a beneficiary on your individual taxable account or your bank accounts, and those are going to go through probate, and those will either get distributed based on what your will says or get distributed based on the law of the land if you don't have a will in place. So that's the other big kind of process piece to it, and kind of what goes through probate and what doesn't go through probate. But I think the other kind of big important question that I get a lot is, when do I need a will? So obviously the simplest way to manage your estate is really good beneficiary titling and ownership of asset structuring. But there are other circumstances where it's good to have a will because, who is going to take care of my kids? So that's one big trigger that I talk to with a lot of clients is, maybe I've got a young married couple and they can manage almost their whole estate just by good beneficiary titling and account titling, and they don't necessarily need to go out and pay a lawyer for a will, because not that much is going to go through probate, and they can manage the majority of their estate through those mechanisms. But
or at the very least, maybe explore some of these free online. Things are really, really simple. That may be an option.
In the back of the napkin sort of trick.
Just sign and date it.
And then And then, so usually one of the big triggering events that I talk through with clients is if they have a kid. The probate process is going to determine, if you and your spouse passed away, who's going to take care of the child and the family going forward. And that obviously is not just a big peace of mind thing, but also just a huge legal matter that needs to get sorted out.
Right. I always tell clients, see getting the will, if you have enough going on or have a kid and you want to get a will in place, see that as an investment, because it's going to cost a little money if you work an attorney to do it. Yes. But it is you directing what happens after you pass away. Who's going to watch your child? Where do assets go? All those things. It's you making those decisions rather than putting it in the hands of people who just maybe not really in tune with what your wishes would be. Right. So things are being decided for you that you may not agree with. So if you're worried about that,
and things may be decided that the rest of the family doesn't agree with.
Right.
And if you don't have a will in place, there could be family fights over who gets to take care of a surviving kid, or family fights over money. Obviously, no one likes to think that your family is going to fight over your assets when you're gone, but those things happen. And just one way that you can avoid them happening is don't let them happen. Right. You get everything down on paper with your wishes. There's no more room for argument.
Yep.
There still can be in the court system, but you can write things into wills that say, I don't want anybody in my family to argue, or else they get disinherited. And we're kind of getting into the weeds on that, but there's a lot of different provisions you can put into a will. But it takes that guesswork out of it.
Right.
It adds just so much direction and makes your will be done.
Yep.
Little pun there.
I thought we were gonna get out of this without a dad joke.
No, I'm keeping them. I'm gonna keep them flowing, Tyler.
So probate versus non-probate. I think there's a lot of advantages to skipping through probate. There's some other strategies you can use for passing along or having assets kind of managed after you pass away. One of those is trusts. So you can use trusts. Essentially, what you're doing with a trust is taking an asset out of your ownership and giving it to this trust, and they become an owner of that property, right? Some people put their homes in there, some people put some money in there. There's a ton of different types of trusts. Some will let you kind of pull income out of it until you pass away, and then it will go to someone else. Some of it you just put in there with a beneficiary on it, and you remove any type of decision making or any type of involvement with it. They can be great ways to kind of skip the estate process and kind of pass things along. One of the things I run into a lot with clients is that they've saved up, they have this IRA or this retirement account, they've been pumping money into it their entire life, and they want to shelter that for whatever reason. One of them may be long-term care. I'm worried about going to a nursing home. I don't want all my money to get zapped out of that. Can I put this into a trust? Qualified accounts cannot go into trusts for the reason that an individual retirement account is owned by an individual. It can't be owned by a trust.
Wait,
right? So you'd have to pull your money out.
It's what it sounds like.
It's what it sounds like.
It's exactly what it sounds like. So IRA, individual retirement account,
individual
has to own it.
That's why you and your wife or you and your husband can't own a joint IRA.
Correct.
It's an individual. The trust can't own it. So in doing that, people would have to take all the money out of those retirement accounts, pay their taxes, and then shelter the money in the trust. It is a bummer. But if you've ever thought, geez, I have this big retirement nest egg, I want to shelter some of it in a trust. Unfortunately, that's not a strategy that ends up working out.
Yeah. And so, that is one of the more complex strategies for legal strategies is using trusts so you can shelter assets, or if you just want to set up a legacy as like a family legacy, you can set up like a family trust. And so there's a lot of different complex things that you can get into, and trusts definitely have their place within the planning realm for anybody's personal finances.
Some of that's directing how things work as well. Say, if I was married, I wanted my wife to have kind of money for the rest of her life, but I really wanted to pass the asset on to our children. You can set up trusts where those trusts can accumulate income. They pay out to my wife for the rest of her life, and then when she passes, all the assets go to the kids. It allows you some control.
Yeah.
Right. It allows you different ways you can control your assets if you were to pass away.
Yeah. And I think definitely trust shouldn't be like this ominous word for folks as they go into the estate planning process, just because a lot of wills will have trusts in them. It doesn't have to be necessarily that much of a more added costs within an estate plan. things called like springing trusts.
Yeah.
So you don't have to set up this trust today. You could have it written into your will that you're going to establish a trust upon your death for any kids that are, under the age of 18.
Yeah.
And that way you can retain some, control over that money after death. And so, maybe you worked your whole life and you saved up a couple $100,000 or $1 million, and you're working and you're thinking to yourself, well, man, I don't want my kid to turn 18 and have all this assets if anything happens to me, right at their formative years.
Yep.
I'm going to make a trust within my will so that way they have triggering points so that they get the money throughout their lifetime.
Yep.
Common things would be like, you get some money at 18, some the next year, some after the year after that, or maybe all the money they get at 25 when they've able to establish themselves a little bit more and just, are hopefully a little bit wiser at that point.
Yep.
So those are other strategies that you can take. And it's very common to have a trust within a will to maintain that little bit of control after you pass. Hopefully you don't, but
yeah, I mean, I think they break down to a couple reasons. You can use trust to avoid estate taxes. I think that's one reason to do it. And then two, it gives you some control on how those assets can be utilized going forward. They're your assets. You're trying to give them to someone. You just want some direction on how that's going to work out. So always working with an attorney, but it is a way to have a big impact on the estate planning process for some folks. And if you want to avoid taxes or if you want some control.
Yeah, and sometimes,
if you don't trust it, trust it.
I thought I was the one in control of the terrible jokes today. And then, sometimes you're thinking you need a trust, you just don't know. You can obviously talk to a financial advisor to see if it makes sense. And then if that financial advisor is on board and says, yeah, maybe this does sound like a good idea, then you can talk to an attorney. Obviously, have those conversations. They're pretty complex topics, and then might end up spending a little bit more. But then at least, even if you do go with the trust option or you don't, you have the peace of mind that you explored it, even if you have to spend a little extra money on the legal fees to get the requisite information.
See it as an investment. This is another good opportunity. If you're working with a financial advisor and you have an attorney, a estate planning attorney, or you have a CPA, very good to get these people to meet each other.
Yes.
Right. So there's a lot of times I'll be going with clients to estate planning meetings with the attorney just to be there as a resource. But a lot of times after, what happens is the clients will come to me and say, what did the attorney just say to me? Hopefully I can break it down for them. But just another kind of reminder to folks, if you're working with multiple professionals, let them all know, let them introduce themselves, talk about it, because I think you're going to get the best outcomes if everyone knows what they're doing. Sorry, that was a quick pitch. I like to tout that and saw an opportunity.
Yeah, no, definitely. You do you, man.
Yeah.
But I think that brings us to the end of our podcast today. I hope everybody has a happy Halloween. Definitely, a little tip of the hat to the full candy bar folks out there. We did appreciate you growing up, and we appreciate you today.
Yeah, don't be the peanut guy.
The foregoing content reflects the opinions of Penobscot Financial Advisors and is subject to change at any time without notice. Content provided herein is for informational purposes only and should not be used or construed as investment advice or a recommendation regarding the purchase or sale of any security. There is no guarantee that the statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Thank you.